All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things to do is I say, I told you so. It's a natural human inclination. I'm not above it. I love being right, or at very least, one of the first to popularize an idea. Some of you may have noticed, but Crystal and I were recently on Joe Rogan's podcast. Joe asked me an interesting question about social conservatism, how it applies to both my views and to the right generally. I turned the tables. I actually explained to Joe, I thought the new social issues of our time have nothing to do with many of the fights of the past. And in my explanation, I named Dave Portnoy as the current largest conservative icon in the country. Let's review for those who missed it.
I think social conservatism today is actually one of the best pieces I read on this. Shout out to Matthew Walther. It's called Rise of the Barstool Conservatives. So if you were to ask me who I think like the biggest like right-wing social icon in America right now, 25 years ago, I would have said like Franklin Graham or something like that. I think it's Dave Portnoy. I really think it is somebody like Portnoy who is anti-PC. The current social conservatism, or at least the way that I think things are moving forward, is anti-woke, anti-PC. And that is where I think the emerging fights are.
I didn't invent the thesis. As I said, I stole it from Matthew Walther, who is a columnist over at The Week. But interestingly enough, someone else appears to have taken notice and added to the discourse, with Politico magazine writing a new piece titled, quote, How Republicans Became the Barstool Party. Now, this might confuse some casual observers of politics, because the question even arises, is Dave Portnoy conservative? By his account, not really, if you're thinking in terms of old ways of doing business. Dave is pro-choice. He's had multiple sex tapes released, which he's proud of. He's pro-gay marriage. So what conservative thing is about him? Well, look, he's conservative in the way that Trump kind of was. He just refuses to bow to the liberal intelligentsia, and he likes to drive them crazy. Portnoy refuses to apologize for past jokes. He basically holds up a middle finger up to the elite. He was one of the most prominent people against lockdowns. And look, to his eternal credit, he raised tens of millions of dollars for small businesses. Every time he tells the liberal media, F you, he gets richer and more popular. Walther describes of Trump and of Portnoy, describing the phenomenon this way, quote, Trump recognized there are millions of Americans who do not oppose or even care about abortion or same-sex marriage, much less stem cell research or any of the other causes that had animated traditional conservatives. He adds, quote, Instead, he correctly intuited the new culture war would be fought over very different and very more nebulous issues, vague concerns about political correctness, SJWs, opposition to the popularization of critical race theory, sentimentality about the American flag and the military, the rights of male undergraduates to engage in fornication while intoxicated without fear of the Title X mafia. That's basically it right there. That's Portnoy's appeal and the direction of the new American right. The fights of the past are in the past. The fights of the future are how do we teach our kids history? Is it okay to be outspokenly patriotic in popular culture and in elite circles? Do we say Merry Christmas again? Can we say, quote unquote, problematic words? Can we roll our eyes at people's pronouns and their email signatures without being called homophobic? Now, look, I know none of these seem that important, but let's be real. This is what gets people going in America, whether you like it or not. This is how Trump won 10 million more votes in 2020. And I suspect if the GOP ever wins a popular vote margin in the future again, it's going to look like Dave Portnoy's fan base. Pretty diverse, pretty male. A huge base of support outside of its traditional voting space. I call it grill dad conservatism. I actually think it's the future. And look, already in the 2020 data, you can see signs of this everywhere. Hispanic males voted for Trump at a higher rate than anyone else compared to 2016 and cited Trump's opposition to woke shibboleths like defund the police and lockdowns as the #1 reason they voted for him. You see the same thing in the modest but still noticeable increase in black men that voted for Trump. And ironically, the only group who voted for him at a lower rate was white men, which I will find eternally funny. But look, I don't want to fully sing the praises of Barstool conservatism because if I have one great worry, it's this. The Barstoolification of the GOP can easily win, but economically, things aren't going to be too great. As Walther writes, quote, where will Barstool conservatism leave what remains of the old conservative movement? In the case of free market dogmatists, I believe there's almost zero daylight between them. The policy papers on why blockchain-enabled future markets and organ donation, brought to you by Manscaped, will revitalize Dayton, Ohio, is going to write itself. Part of Portnoy's core ethos isn't economic libertarianism. And look, I mean, it served him quite well. It's obviously evident in his stand for retail investors during GameStop and more. But when you translate that to public policy, you actually get a lot of the same old Paul Ryan stuff with a new flair on it. Barstool and conservatism could easily end up being the new cover album for the tax cut GOP of old. All of this, I guess, is to say, is if you want to keep on your eye on where things are headed, look to our culture for people who are anti-PC and anti-woke. That's where the new conservative movement is, and what actually probably could win, and who will likely be in charge a decade from now. It's interesting, Crystal. There's a lot of debate.